When I pray with my poetry, I'm using a form of contemplative prayer. How did I get started writing poetry? It wasn't until I made my sabbatical in 1990 that I began to write poetry. It just started to come. And then I showed it to my spiritual director on sabbatical, and she was thrilled with it. So she encouraged me to write more and more and more. When I write poetry, I call it seeping. Maybe 3, 4, maybe a whole week, maybe 3 weeks, maybe a month will go by, and nothing will come. But during that seeping time, I might see a word, and I'll put it in a book, a notebook that I keep. Or I might be reading something and like the way it was expressed. Like maybe the sun shone through the trees as it sparkled on the water. So I'll put that there in hopes that I'll use it sometime in some way. And that's what I do. I might be praying and thought will come to me. For example, last Sunday, this past Sunday, Rhonda wrote a poem about fire. And the opposite of fire is light. And then I began to write, it just came. I wrote light, and then I wrote some phrases about light. Then I put light again and thought some more in a different way about light. And finally, I looked back and I had 4 lines about light. And it ended up that Jesus is the light of the world. And I got that from light helps us to see, for example. After I've written a poem, I'll put it away, maybe for a half hour or so. Then I'll take it out again, and I'll read it and say to myself, what does this mean to someone else that might be reading it, that wouldn't know from whence this came from me? And so I pray over it that way, and then I reread it. I usually read it out loud then, and I might correct a few things, put in a different word or change a different expression. And then I know it's there, and I know that I can go back to it any time at all and pray with it. Not all my poems are spiritual poems. I've had the very first ones were about anything, but then I began to find that poems that were about my religious experience had deeper depth to them. When I pray with my poetry, I'm using a form of contemplative prayer where I visualize what it is I'm saying in the poem. And I know that a lot of people don't realize that this is what they do when they are in the mode of yoga pose for rest. You're just resting, and you're letting whatever comes into you either go by until you become empty. And so that is what a form of contemplative prayer. You're using your inner energy, the inner forces that are in you to achieve an outside happening. And that is what I'm doing with contemplative prayer. I'm using the inner forces of my soul that are from God in order so that my life, which I will, after the period of contemplation, go out and be, will be richer and more true and more letting people into who I am in my relationship with God. As first, when I was a novice doing this poetry, I would think of a subject in nature, because nature tends to be poetic. And I would go out and look at the thing I was going to write the poetry about and just think about different aspects of it and where it was located and what was the surrounding atmosphere at the time. Say you were going to write a poem about a dandelion. Well, go out and find a dandelion and bring it in and think about that dandelion. Look at the dandelion and think what a dandelion, why it is, and how it propagates, and how beautiful it is, and how perfect. Every petal in the dandelion is perfect. And then think about what happens to the dandelion as it is finished, it's blooming. It becomes those, we used to call them wishers, and you can blow them. But each individual represents one of the petals in that whole dandelion. And so you're blowing it and you're causing it to propagate. And so then you take those ideas and put them into poetry. And you don't have to know rhyme, and you don't have to know rhythm, because it comes. Holy Saturday Vigil was a result of an article I had read on the middle space, the in-between space of life and of every event and thing that happens. You have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And one of the middle spaces during Holy Week is Holy Saturday. So I named it Holy Mystery. Holy Mystery revealed, standing in the middle space, I see, I watch, I keep vigil. In this deep, silent place, my attention is sharpened. A firefly darts within this sacred space, unpredictable, yet predictable. Long and dark this night, from the tomb of in-betweenness, of faithfulness, of otherworldliness, comes vision, comes revelation, comes life. This new body breaks all bonds. Startled, it reveals long suppressed truths, commanding, go, bear witness to your struggles for justice, to the fruits of your contemplation, to the long, dark, mysterious night.